The Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. With your hosts, Joe Bond and AJ Applegarth.
Touchdown! All right. Welcome to the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, as usual, Mr. AJ Applegarth. How's it going, man? You're not feeling too good still.
I'm feeling all right. Had a battle.
Hour and through.
Yeah. Got sacked out a week ago, and it's actually starting from last show. After that, day Friday was kind of a mess, but on the mend. Tested negative now, so I'm back to the office for work tomorrow, and but looking forward to a good show tonight. Let's kick it off with our rankings review and go from there.
Yeah, man. So, before we jump into that, though, want to remind everybody to hit that subscribe button, that like button, leave those comments. We appreciate it. And, of course, while there is still time before the season, jump over to fantasysixpack.net/plans, become an all-access member. You're going to get access to our award-winning rankings that we will be going over some of them tonight. Our draft cheat sheet, our Discord, where you get access to talk to all of us over there at Fantasy Six Pack and ask your personal league questions. And then during the season, we got even more. Like there's a ton of DFS content from Dave Eddy and Chris Robin and Keith Fleming, and we got some betting content. We brought on 3 new great guys, the Parlay Fantasy Football guys, to help us out with some betting content as well. So we got lots more in store for you during the season. So make sure you come by and use promo code F6P NFL 24 to save 15%. All right. Without further ado, let's bring on our guests. First, we got Mick Chialella. I told you I was going to kill it.
All good. Hey, guys.
I felt like it was sort of close.
That was sort of close. Chialella. That was very good.
All right. So Mick is from Fantrax, and he does a lot of work over there, and he's been one of the top rankers over Fantasy Pros for quite some time. So glad to have you here, man. How's it going?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. And then next guest is Tyler O from JWB Fantasy. Again, another guy who has you see his name atop the Fantasy Pros Accuracy Challenge pretty regularly. So glad to have you here, and this is quite the crowd. How's it going on, man?
Thrilled to be here, man. It is officially redraft season. I play all the formats, but redraft will always have my heart. Really take the draft seriously. So I am happy to be here. Happy the season is right around the corner.
Absolutely. All right. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through some of our rankings and break down some of where we're a little different. And but AJ is going to lead the show here and kind of lead,
Yes, I will be the maestro of the mic tonight, I guess. So bear with me in my awesome talking skills for the evening, but we're going to start off. We're going to just go through some general rankings questions, kind of see how you guys, look at your rankings for the year and what goes into them. Not taking everything away. So that said, Mick, we'll start with you. Without giving away all of your secrets here, what are some of the things that you use that factor into your actual rankings?
I think one of the first things I do as far as my process, I like to look at projections. I'm not smart enough to come up with my own projections, but I do kind of like to get a gauge of different projection systems and kind of map out what that equates to from a ranking standpoint. So I do that. I have a few different sources that I use. I use #football, Fantrax, a couple other ones in there. Fantasy Pros has a nice tool there where you can have 4 or 5 different projection systems in there. So I use kind of a mishmash of those, and then I kind of look at my own sort of, theories and biases as far as certain players I like, certain schemes I like. So that's basically how I come up with my rankings, is kind of start with projections and then go from there.
All right, Tyler, what goes into your secret sauce of rankings?
Yeah, I mean, it's for the most part purely projection based. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I've kind of was just doing rankings, and I was like, I'm not really putting anything into this. Well, this is just off the gut. That didn't really cut it for me. So I started kind of messing around doing my own projections, got a hold of a spreadsheet, talked to some people in the industry about how to kind of create it, and really just started hammering down and just really deciding I'm going to be a projections based ranker, right? And that's kind of my process and how I go about everything. So kind of do the projections from scratch every year. Obviously there's a lot of historical data that goes into there. Start at the team level, work your way down to the player level, but a lot of it comes down to projections. Obviously it's not just projections. Obviously I put those projections into ranks. They shift a little bit. I think the biggest thing is I put those projections and ranks up to a mock draft, and then if something doesn't feel right, I shift and move players. So it's not completely projection based. There's a little bit of a gut check there, but I would say for the most part the ranks are really coming through my own projections that I work on pretty much year round.
All right, Joe, anything different to add for how you do yours and get trophies?
No, I mean it's much the same as Mick. Actually, I use the projections that we have here at Fantasy Six Pack, but it's not just those. My rankings will not be the same as just the projections spit out. It is a little bit of maybe I don't agree with the projections, right? It's I think this guy might get a little bit more work, or less, or I just don't believe him in as much, whatever. So it is adding my own little flavor to the projections as well, if you want to call it that.
Nice. All right, sounds good. Well, all good input and good things to work off of here. So next thing we want to touch on is the rookies, because we have rookies every year that are coming in different positions, and some have a lot more hype than others, and we've seen good and bad things from the rookies. So Tyler, we'll start with you on this one. How do you treat your rookie rankings, rookie players for your rankings?
Certainly. So, I mean, it shouldn't come too much of a surprise, but I kind of create my own rookie ranks, have my own kind of profile. I put numbers into it to decide the ranks. Definitely don't follow the numbers as much, just because I think it's a little bit more of a crapshoot trying to decide how are these college players going to translate to the NFL. But I do my own kind of rookie ranks, and then once I kind of sort that out, figure out where they're going to go, I put them into the regular draft ranks. I would say I'm typically kind of aggressive, with my rookie rankings and where they fall in my rankings, just because there's this big part where I'm it's kind of that, mystery package, kind of a bit of an unknown, how things are going to go. I think some of the biggest upside that we've seen, comes from unknown upside comes from the rookies. I just would rather take a shot on a rookie than have to, take the kind of the same old guy that we know we're going to get the same thing year after year. So, it really just starts with kind of my own little analysis. They work their way into it with all the veterans, but I think generally speaking, I'm more aggressive with the rookies and drafting rookies. Maybe not in the industry leagues, but perhaps your your regular home leagues.
All right, Joe.
For me, it's a lot of I'm not a big rookie guy. I'm trying to fix that. Jumping into the Fantrax college fantasy league for the first time ever. Shout out to Fantrax for that. Trying to get my my knowledge back up on the college guys. But what I do now, I have the people that I trust, to kind of analyze the rookies for me at this point. And I trust their word, right? And I look at some of the analytics of the guys. You're right, Tyler. Looking at raw numbers from college, they don't translate. There's guys that just blow up. They don't play. They don't play great competition, or whatever. We see back in the day, a lot of these Heisman winners, they were garbage in the pros, because this is a different game. So numbers don't matter really. But it's the analytics, it's the raw numbers, it's the how well can they run routes, it's how well what's their vision, their elusiveness, break tackle stuff, that matters. And then landing spot obviously is a big part of it too. So I know we're going to talk about some of the rookies today. So I don't want to jump too much into the weeds here, but like landing spot does make a big difference. Like for a receiver, like who's your quarterback? Like that.
Yeah,
that's a big difference. When it comes to like kind of nitpicking between some of these guys, and for running backs, it's looking at offensive line and just predicting volume for them as well is a big factor in it to it as well. And it's a guessing game, obviously a little bit more for the rookies than the vets, but if you're looking at like a receiver that's going to a team with a whole bunch of vacated targets, maybe you can bump up his share a little more than somebody else.
Okay, Mick, how about you? What do you think of the rookie classes for your rankings?
Well, I think part of the reason why this show is going to be so fun is because I have pretty much the opposite practice that Tyler does when it comes to rookies. I'm a hater for the most part. I want to see them prove it. I need people to prove it. So, that doesn't always work in my favor. Rookies have, over the last few years in particular, had more of an impact than ever before. So perhaps that's something I need to tweak in my process. But especially, we're talking about, especially when we play in industry leagues. And, I think so many analysts and managers in particular, they want to be first on a guy, right? So they want that, like, I was in on him before anybody else. So I think that kind of leads to some helium on certain players, whereas I kind of shy away from that. So like you mentioned before, in a home league, I will take, several rookies, but in industry leagues, I always tend to gravitate more towards like the boring players because I want to see rookies prove it. And some of these guys get hyped up so much that for me, it's just not worth the price most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I did notice that while going through some of these questions and everything. So it's going to be fun. Yeah. Well, it's definitely going to be fun to highlight
the Pick on Mick show.
Yeah,
as I titled it.
Definitely not.
You laughed, so I said we're going to run with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll make sure to give some digs at these other guys too, because everybody deserves a good ribbing here and there. So. The last general question we have here, and Joe, we'll start with you on this one, but what kinds of rankings do you give, for your established veterans that have changed teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more, it's fairly close to like what you would do with the rookies that are landing on a new team, right? You're looking at opportunity. But then, for the veterans, right, you're also looking at, you at least have past data on them that, in the NFL, right? So you can say, okay, this guy generally has done this, but, looking at a receiver like Keenan Allen, for instance, right? Like take him, it's a perfect example. Moving to a new team, now it's a little more crowded wide receiver room for him. Quarterback potentially isn't as good. Like it's very, very unknown. So, he gets bumped down as compared to where he has been in years past. So that kind of stuff. But there's also times where, veterans go to a new team and it's like, oh, they're going to be the dude. Like this is it. Like, can you bump them way up? So, you kind of look at opportunity costs and, just history of the player as well to kind of see how they would fit in the rankings and projections.
All right, Mick, what do you think about the established vets and their new locales?
Yeah, I think it's a similar. I have a similar mindset. It's interesting you mentioned Keenan Allen. So like last year, I wasn't particularly high on DJ Moore because I figured he was going to a new team, questionable quarterback play, and he ended up killing it. So I think each situation is different, but I do think you have to factor scheme into account. Any sort of past history with either a position group or a potential head coach that may be familiar with that player and his skill set. So I think those are the kind of things that I look at when evaluating players who move on to different teams.
All right, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, with every player, it's like, what are we attributing to their success? Is it the talent or the situation? Always, a little bit of both. But like, if I'm looking at a player and they're successful and they go somewhere, I ask myself that question, was it the situation or was it the talent that made them successful in that spot? The answer is talent. I'm usually pretty cool with wherever they're going to go unless it's a terrible situation, right? But I think if it's a player who's just in a good situation, it really just comes down to that question where I ask myself when a player moves, especially like a fantasy relevant player, obviously, right? Is it the talent of the situation that we really like here? So I think that's a big piece that I ask myself when those kind of things come across.
All right. Well, that wraps up our general rankings questions. So now let's get into the fun. We're going to start off with the QB position here and start with a guy that is a little liked and a little not as liked from our rankers here. So Mr. Anthony Richardson is our first player. So Mick, you have Richardson, nearly outside the top 12 here at 11, whereas Joe and Tyler are looking at him as a top 6 guy. So can you explain your thinking behind your ranking of Richardson?
Absolutely. And one thing I will mention, I mean, you guys know this from doing projections and things. A lot of times these margins are super thin. So even I have Richardson at QB 11 right now, and he's less than a point away from my QB 6. So It's not as if I think he's a bum and going to be terrible. I think, we're talking about very thin margins here.
Yeah.
But as far as Richardson in particular, I just want to see him on the field. You know what I mean? Last year he played in only 4 games. He left 2 of those games early. So I want to see him do it for, doesn't have to be 17 games. Let it be 14 games, 15 games. I think he's going to be great when he's on the field. If you have him, you're probably starting him. But I just want to see him do it more consistently. And I wonder if based on the injury history, so much of his production last year in a small sample size was based on his rushing ability. I think he had 4 touchdowns in 3 full games or something along those lines. But I wonder if maybe they pull the reins on him running a little bit, which could, give him a little bit of a hit in his value. So I think he'll be fine. I just don't want to, anoint him a top 5 quarterback yet. If I get him in a draft, I'm definitely going to supplement him with a middle of the road QB2 just because of the risk factor involved.
Okay, good insight there. Tyler, what are your thoughts? Obviously, like I said, you have him sitting. You actually have him at 5, one spot ahead of Joe. Do you see things differently, obviously, than Mick?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a common trend just between like how Mick and I approach fantasy football. It's just kind of like I've seen enough. I want to be clear. Like, I didn't like Anthony Richardson as a prospect. I didn't necessarily think he was going to be like a good football player. But we're talking about fantasy football, and he's huge. He's an athletic freak. He didn't play a lot. Obviously, got hurt last year. But what we did see in like 2 full healthy games, I think it was like a 23-point game and another like 31-point game. Like, again, small sample size. I understand why like Mick would want to see it or how other people want to see it. But he had 10 rushes in those games. And if you're getting a quarterback that's going to be rushing the ball 10 times of his side of his speed, like QB1 is absolutely in the conversation. So it's more for me like, okay, I can grab a quarterback who I believe has QB1 overall upside. And then, of course, there's going to be another, if that doesn't work out, I can grab a quarterback later. But I'm always going to be shooting for that kind of like, can this player be the number 1 overall player at their position, right? And if they can, like, I want them. I want to be ahead of the market. I want to make sure they're on my fantasy team in case they do hit. I'll even take the approach where he's more likely to not hit than he is, sure. But he has that ceiling. I don't want to go as far as to say like break fantasy football because I think that's a bit ridiculous. I've seen that being pushed around a little bit. But at the end of the day, he does have the QB1 overall. You talked about like, to scale back the running. Sure, like maybe he doesn't run 10 times a game. Maybe he runs 6 or 7 times a game. Still, I want a piece of this. I think he has the ability to be the QB1 overall. And because of that, I want to be ahead of the market and grab him on my team when I miss out on my big 4. He starts off the second tier for me where we have the first 4 that are the top tier, and then he kind of kicks things off there at the top of the second tier.
All right. Joe, anything different to add with you having him at 6 or pretty in line with what Tyler?
No, I'm pretty similar to Tyler. I get the risk factor and Mick, like when I first ranked it, I was like, no way I can put him that high. I just kept thinking about like the absolute ceiling for him and Tyler, like spot on. He could be the QB1. I mean, perfect example. in Scott Fish, and we know the scoring this year, right? It's passing quarterbacks sort of take a hit because it's 50 yards per point. So like all the rushing quarterbacks get a huge boost, even more than they usually do, right? And so it's super flex, and so QB still flying off the board. I had the second pick. I legit thought about taking Anthony Richardson with the second pick over Hurts. I mean, because you got against 3,000 other people, you got to take the home run swing. I didn't do it, but like I might be kicking myself, you know what I mean? So I finally got a share of him this past week in the fantasy 6-pack league. I was just like, you know what, screw it, I'm going for it. Bam, got him. And like, yeah, super nervous, but man, that could work out real well, So it's one of those things that, yeah, that rushing ability is absolutely there, and we saw him throw the ball, and I mean, it looked clean, it looked crisp, way better than I thought it was going to be. Same with Tyler, and so I'm all for putting him up there because I think if he stays healthy, like he's probably going to outperform that ranking. But I do add a little bit of the maybe he misses a game or two from getting a little dinged up, or he gets knocked out of a game, because of whatever. But hopefully he's learned to like slide or protect himself more than anything.
Yeah. All right. So clearly not really anyone afraid of the sophomore slump here with him. So that's good to see. So moving on to our next guy here is Mr. Jayden Daniels. We're looking, similar to Richardson. Mick is, got him 6 spots lower than Tyler and Joe here. So Tyler, why are you this high on the rookie?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm about to make the exact same argument as I did with A. Rich. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, we haven't seen it. I think there's more risk. That's why he's lower. But it's the rushing upside. We know he can rush. Yeah. We saw it in the preseason. We saw it in college. And much like Anthony Richardson, where I think he is very much has a lot of work to do as a passer. I think Jayden's probably a better passer coming out of college, but he's a little bit smaller, not as good of an athlete. But I think that rushing upside is still there. For me, he's like kind of one of the last players that I've taken. So I kind of look at it this way, where he's one of the last quarterbacks that I'll take late in kind of my 1 QB kind of standard redraft leagues, where I'm like, he has legit QB1 upside. I'm not going to go as far as to say that Jayden Daniels has the QB1 overall upside, which if you want to make the argument, I don't think I would totally crush you for it. But I do really think that, just considering how much we're going to see from a rushing perspective from him, that he is going to be a top 10, top 12 quarterback relatively easily if he does play all 17 games, even if the Commanders are absolute dog water, right? Just because I think he's going to be rushing like that. That's the way fantasy football works. Like, if you're a quarterback and you rush 6 times a game, right, just in general, you're going to be a QB1. Like, that's how this works. So for me, it's just more of like, I expect him to rush, and because of that, I'm going to rank him appropriately.
All right. Joe, you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as you know, I took him as my second quarterback in Scott Fish. So a lot of Scott Fish talk here, but yeah, I'm in on the Daniels. The rushing ability is it's going to carry him to a QB1 finish in my opinion. So pretty much exactly what Tyler said.
Mick, this is our first rookie on the board here. So is this where the hate train starts?
First of many. Yeah, but again, I don't hate him. I just think there are a lot of quarterbacks in that like low QB1, high QB2 range in 12-team leagues. Like if I can take anybody between 10 and 18 and kind of make a case for him as a top 10 guy. So I don't think it's anything against Daniels. I do think he has a pretty high floor based on the rushing aspect. Mm-hmm. But the passing offense, I just, I'm not sold on the receivers outside of McLaurin. So I just want to see a little bit more. Obviously, he has the ability. I'm a Jets fan. I watched the first preseason game. He threw a bomb on his first pass and then ran in for a score. So obviously, he's got some talent and he's got some upside. But yeah, I just have a little bit lower than some of those other guys in that low QB1 range.
Well, do you mind if I just chime in here a little bit more, Jayden Daniels, just like kind of where I'm at with this? Not more of a retort to make, but it's like I was like pulling my projections. Like, out of all of the quarterbacks that I projected for a full season, which is like not your like Minshew's, not your Drake Mays, like not your Raiders, not your Patriots, for all the quarterbacks that I have projected, like I'm projected for the lowest passing total of all the quarterbacks who I projected for a full season of passing.
That's
I
fair.
projected right around like a little over 3,600, which is not great. I mean, that's like fully healthy, right? So, but the thing is, it's just the rushing, right? I would say that's like prove a point to the listeners more so than the folks right here, but it's more like I have him like projected as the 27th or 28th overall passer, but it's because I do believe he has it in him to rush for 700, 800 yards, 6, 7 touchdowns on the ground. That's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to target. Like I totally am like going to say like, yeah, bad passer, probably one of the worst passers in the NFL this season, without a doubt. But I just think the impact of the running game in fantasy football, how we play today, is just, for me, it's tough to understate that.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to the Bears quarterback here shortly. But first, we'll speaking of not passing for many yards ever. All right, we'll start off with before we get to that, we'll hit on our next guy here. That's Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy. So this one, we're kind of flipping the script a little bit, where Mick, you got him at 7, and Joe and Tyler, you got him sitting at your QB 12. So Joe, we'll start with you on this one. You guys obviously just have him right at the top 12 here. Why are you down on Purdy in a sense? I mean, obviously you're not that far down if he's still QB1, but barely. I mean, why are you putting some of these other guys ahead of him, I guess, is the main question here.
It's really that, like, he's got a great supporting cast around him that really helps him, and Purdy's a fine quarterback, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I mean, he might throw for 4,000 yards again. Is 31 touchdowns repeatable? I mean, that touchdown efficiency rate was pretty high. And that's a number that, we like to say a lot with like your running backs and your receivers. Touchdowns aren't sticky. Well, they're not sticky for quarterbacks either. Like, I mean, we just saw Pat Mahomes go from like 50 touchdowns to what? Whatever it was, like some low number. I forget exactly what it was now, but like it wasn't. Now I don't expect that sort of massive drop, but if he passes for 5-6 less touchdowns, he's not finishing, QB 8 or whatever he was last year. Like it's not going to happen. He can run around a little bit, but that's not part of his game. So with more and more running quarterbacks, it's going to be hard for these like pocket passer guys to like stay super relevant and consistent in fantasy compared to the running guys.
Yeah. Mick, what do you have to say for why you like Purdy more than these guys?
So I think it's an interesting conversation because there's a little bit of theory with the pocket passers versus the running quarterbacks. I think there's definitely more risk involved in a pocket passer falling off, but on the flip side, I think there's more of a risk of a running quarterback getting injured. But regardless of how you view that, Purdy was 6th in total points last year. He was 8th in points per game among quarterbacks. And, especially now that Ayuk is back in the fold, I think we're going to look at a very similar offense. And I know the touchdown efficiency feels out of whack, but I'm not sure if it is in this system. They have all their weapons again, and, Shanahan designs all these amazing schemes where people are running open in the open fields like there's nobody defending them. So I think that, Purdy can at least come close to repeating that season, if not a full repeat. Even if he drops down a couple of touchdowns, I still think he's going to have, the efficiency. He averaged over 9 yards per attempt last year. I just think that it's a very efficient offense in the passing game, and I think Purdy is pretty decent bet to repeat or come very close to what he did last year.
Okay. Tyler, anything to add or?
Not so much. I mean, I think it's just that there's kind of like this range of pocket passer quarterbacks where, you could bump them up 2 or 3 spots from where I have them ranked now, and I wouldn't really get too crazy about it. The floor is there. It feels pretty safe. I would agree with Mick that I think that the situation he's in is probably one of the better ones. If we expect a quarterback to be super efficient, playing in Shanahan's 49ers offense is definitely one to do it. So I agree with a lot with what Joe said. He's just letting I think the floor is great. He's probably not going to get hurt, but usually shooting for the upside a little bit more with these quarterback selections.
Okay. All right. Well, That's good input for Purdy there. Next up, like I said, alluded to the Bears quarterback, another rookie here, Caleb Williams. You guys are all, pretty much in line with him. And then the next guy we have here, we're kind of doing like a tag team with these two guys, and that's Tua Tagovailoa. Again, he's, Mick's got him at 13. Tyler, you got him at 14, and Joe, you're down at 15. So both of these guys are kind of lumped together here, but what's your tiebreaker when you kind of come across two guys where you have this close of a matchup? Mick, you kind of alluded to the very fine line of how close all of these rankings are. So we'll start with you on this one. What was kind of your tiebreak between these two? I mean, you've got them literally one after the other.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting is Tua actually finished 17th in points per game last year, which is lower than I had thought. So again, if you wanted to take Caleb over Tua, I wouldn't fight you on it. I still think that with the weapons in that offense, and he's proven it over a couple of seasons, I do like Caleb Williams. Obviously, he's got immense upside, especially from a dynasty standpoint, obviously. But I think I trust Tua a little bit more with the weapons around, and they've been in that scheme for a couple of years. So yeah, I'm going to lean towards Tua, but again, it's not a strong lean. I wouldn't fight anybody who wanted to take Caleb.
Okay, Tyler, what do you think between these two? You've got them actually flip flopped from Mick. Again, one right after the other, though.
Yeah, I mean the Purd, it's like a range. It's like after Jayden Daniels goes, it's like Caleb Williams, T-Law, Tua, and I guess you could say like Jared Goff, where they're just kind of like in this like tier, right? Mm-hmm. Where I'm letting other people pick those players, and I'll just take what's left. And that's essentially how I decide the tier break or tie break. What that tells me is like if you're playing in the 1 QB leagues, which I'm assuming most people are, is like those are the last quarterbacks to go, right? So I'm just going to be in a situation where I'm letting other people pick. I think they're in the same range. I think they're going to finish around the same spot. I mean, frankly, they're all projected within less than a point per game for me. So it's just one of those situations. I think if you wanted to get like a little bit more fun with it, like, do I have any like fun stacks that I could like stack those guys with? Like, those are always kind of fun to play with, did I grab, a DJ Moore, then I might go Caleb. If I was able to get like Kirk or Ingram, I might go Trevor Lawrence, Purdy, if I got like Kittle or Ayuk or Deebo or something, just because it's always fun to kind of root for the stacks and get those big hits. But for me, when I get into this range, we're talking most people have already selected their first quarterback. They're really not, rushing to the podium, let's say, to grab their second quarterback. So I'd kind of like let things fall to me and just kind of grab some value by then. I've kind of, I've taken on almost, I would say, a late round tight end approach as we kind of reach these, quarterback 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Joe, anything different or to add on it? Or
yeah, I mean, we're talking, fractions of a point different per game here. Like it's really not much of a difference. At this point, I always say it's kind of personal preference. Caleb is a little more upside play, a little bit of unknown. He's not like a big runner, but he'll run more than Tua for sure. And I think that's kind of what pushed me over the top. Like, Tua's got the weapons, but I mean, like, even though he led the league in passing last year, like this run attack is so good, he's not scoring the touchdowns. So they get close and they just hand the ball off. And so I kind of foresee a lot of the same thing happening again. And that's what drops Tua just slightly.
All right. So the last guy that we have here to highlight is Mr. Dak Prescott. And this one, again, it's kind of close between the three of you, but unlike the other two, you guys all have them at a different location. So why do we think we have the disparity with Dak? Tyler, we'll start with you.
A couple things for me. I'll be the first to say I really like Dak Prescott, right? I think he's a QB1. I think he's definitely kind of in that range where I feel pretty good about him. Like I'd probably take him over Jayden Daniels. I know I talked about Jaden's upside. I think he's sitting right next to Jordan Love for me. Got Kyler right ahead because of the rushing. I just think the rushing's like Dak is not running like he used to. I It might be the ankle, it might just be age, it might be the scheme. I don't know what it is, but he's not running like he did when we saw him coming out of college. And I think that dings him a little bit for me. And traditionally, the Dallas Cowboys have also been one of the fastest paced offenses in terms of passing, the highest volume passing offenses that we've seen the last couple of years. I mean, they're running fast, they're playing fast, they're throwing the ball a lot. Like, it's great for fantasy. My concern is really just like, what if that scales back even a little bit? Are we talking like low end QB1 opposed to his QB, I think 3 or 4 finish that he had the year before? I think the ranking that I have on Zach is less of a indictment on him and more of how I like the guys ahead of him a bit more.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Dak is fine. You know what you're going to get from him. Totally can win a league with him. Upside is, not quite there. Like, some of the other guys, mainly because the running isn't there. I mean, he's gonna need a lot of touchdowns to finish higher than 7, 8, 9, and it's very possible with CeeDee Lamb there, of course. But I do kind of think that offense might take a little bit of a step back this year. Not as good of a running game. And, if CD doesn't just blow up like he did last year, then Dak takes a slight step back. So 7 feels about right. Again, I haven't taken him anywhere. I'd rather chase a little more upside and grab one of these other guys later who's got some wheels on him and can possibly, finish in the top 5. But if you just want safety, Dak's your guy. He really is.
My thing about Dak is like, what happens if something happens to CeeDee Lamb, right? I think that could be disastrous.
Yeah.
Like, I know we're not playing for injury, right? But think about it, like CJ Stroud, like, oh, Nico gets hurt or Tank gets hurt, like he's still probably gonna crush. Like, there's a lot going on there. It's just, I think there's a lot tied up into CeeDee Lamb. Like, all respect to Ferguson, I think he's a very fine tight end in that National Football League. But I think it's just really just kind of, he has his ace and there's really nothing left there to support it. And that scares me a little bit, just enough to get him down just, to 9 opposed to where he could finish like last year around 3 or 4. I think that's a piece of it for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mick, what about you? You've got Dak the highest of the group here at 5.
I do have him at 5, but like you guys mentioned before, I think there's a pretty clear top 4. So even though I have Dak 5, I'm not drafting a lot of him either, because I either want one of the top 4 guys or I would rather take a lower QB1 and try to get some upside. Having said that, though, I think the floor is really high. I mean, he finished 3rd in points last year, 4th in points per game, led the league in touchdowns, which, Joe mentioned may not be sticky, but, he's got pretty much the same cast. We all acknowledge that CeeDee Lamb is basically the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver overall. So, if we go with correlation there, Dak's got to throw it to somebody. The running game is not great. And I think the defense, what was interesting about the defense last year, they had so many turnovers and so many pick sixes. If the defense takes a step back and allows some more points, that might actually give Prescott room to throw the ball a bit more than he did last year. It's a very pass-heavy offense, and with the running backs being, Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook, I mean, it's not 2019, so I think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So again, like, I'm not personally drafting Prescott a lot, unless I can get him at QB8, QB9, then perhaps. But I do think overall he's going to finish higher than a lot of those guys in that range.
All right. Good input for all these guys here. That wraps up our QB player rankings here. So let's go ahead and move it over to running back, and we will start with James Cook. So, Joe, this is a running back that you clearly aren't as high on as Mick and Tyler. So why the hate, or why the strong dislike?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been struggling with this range of running backs, and honestly, next week, right before the season, I might change my mind. No idea. I just, I mean, this offense in general, I mean, I don't even have Josh Allen as a number one quarterback. I have a number two. I do think this offense is going to struggle mightily at times. It's going to be a lot on Josh Allen's shoulders to be able to run with this ball. Rely on Dalton Kincaid as the top target in the offense, and I'm not sure Kincaid is ready to take on a Travis Kelce role type deal. As good as he is, and James Cook has shown at times where he is awesome, but there hasn't been a Buffalo running back in quite some time that has really been able to like shoulder the load quite like that and been like a superstar at the running back position. James Cook is good, but I just worry like this offense isn't going to score as many points as people think. So that's going to affect Cook's like volume compared to some of these other guys that are in offenses that will stay on the field more.
All right, Mick, what do you think about Cook? You've got him at 13 here.
Yeah, I like Cook. He finishes the RB11 last year, and we have the Joe Brady effect. Once he took over as the offensive coordinator later in the season, Cook was a lot more involved. Buffalo ran the ball a ton. And, kind of what Joe mentioned about the pass game, there's a very unproven receiver room. We have Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. All those guys have some upside where they're at, but there's no alpha there with Stephon Diggs out. So, Kincaid looks like he's going to be the top passing option, but I'm not sure how much volume he's going to get. So I think they're still going to rely on the running game quite a bit. And it's still going to be an efficient offense. They're still going to score a lot of points, even if they're not at quite the levels they've been at the past couple of years from a points per game standpoint. I think they're going to get a lot of red zone opportunities, and you're going to see, Allen and Cook kind of tag team, a lot of those goal line carries. So I like Cook's upside as well as his floor in that offense.
Tyler, what do you think on Cook here? Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm at 13. Mick, you had him at 12.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things where I don't really have a strong opinion either way. Finished RB11 last year. I think he was like RB17 though in points per game. Like he just kind of won the war of attrition, like by not missing games that got him that high to be an RB1. But winning the war of attrition is gonna. That's all RB is really. Like can you stay healthy for 17? Can you stay healthy for 17 games? Like if you're getting the volume, you're gonna be an RB1. So like I'm not knocking him for that. Like I'm not gonna knock him for staying healthy, but I think it's more of like he just sits in like a pretty big tier for me, and we'll get to Achane later. But for me, he's kind of in this range where I take a look at my ranks, and like after kind of for me, it's like the Josh Jacobs goes, Cook, Rachaad White, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, even like Montgomery, Kamara, like kind of like this. It's just a big tier running backs where there's not a lot of question marks, but like maybe there's a couple. There's a little bit of reservation. It's not like you're smashing these guys as your RB1. So I wanted to give a little bit of color there. I don't have like a strong opinion on James Cook one or another. I wouldn't say I'm somebody who's a promoter or a detractor of his, but if he falls a couple spots, I've been known to take him, but certainly not going to reach.
All right, well, that was a perfect segue because we're hitting Achane next here, so we'll let you lead off the discussion then. This seems to be our outlier running back where we have a wide range of ranks here. Tyler, you've got him starting at 8, and then Joe 12, and Mick 17. So we'll go in that order. Tyler, floor is yours.
It's a bold rank, and I'm not gonna sit here and tell you like it's not a bold rank. I think that there's just and like from a projection standpoint, it's really hard to like really get him that high, considering just like if you take what he did last year, and you're kind of like, all right, even if there's a little bit of an uptick, like it's still tough because I think it's his snap share wasn't high; it was around the 40-45% range, and his touches, I think he had about 12 touches a game, like that. When if you tell me, hey Tyler, we got a running back ranked that's going to see under 50% snap share, that's going to see less than 12 touches, I'd say that's pretty ridiculous. I'd say that's insane. I would say it's borderline stupid. But I think everyone's going to say this, and I think it's part of it. It's just like he's hyper efficient. Obviously, arguably, I think by some metrics, the most efficient running back last year. And I think it's just he's the And I think this is where I kind of take like the numbers out of it. Like I'm again very projections based, very I guess analytics based. But when I kind of take that out of it, I think he is the perfect back in the perfect system to smash. And I think for me, the last bit about this is he has the ability to absolutely explode. Let's say he gets even to 55% snap share. Something happens to Mostert. Like again, I don't project for injury, but Mostert's an old man. He's been hurt before. And then he doesn't need 25 touches to crush. He needs maybe 15, 16 to crush, right? And he needs like a very regular workload. Like he needs like what a running back would get in a committee that's on the 1A side, I think, to be a top 3, top 5 running back just with the system that he's in and how efficient he is and how well he fits in that system. So I don't want to miss on Achane this year. I think that's really what this comes down to. Is I want to be on board. I want to have the shares, and if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm willing to kind of take that L. But I think that the upside is phenomenal with what we saw last year. And if we can just see the snaps move up a little bit, we can just see the touches move up a little bit. Maybe there's expanded role in the pass game. I know they're a little thin at wide receiver right now. Maybe he starts to line it up wide a little bit. I think there's a lot of little things that can happen that are realistic, in my opinion, that can vault him to get enough snaps and enough touches to really see him as a top back. I would say that if I was a betting man, it probably might not happen. But again, just the way I'm playing fantasy football comes down to the fact that I'm betting on upside, right? And even if that chance of upside is smaller, I'm going to take it. I see it with the Achane, so I have him ranked high. I'm aggressive with the ranking because I want him on a lot of my fantasy teams.
Yeah. All right. Joe?
Yeah, I'm very hesitant with Achane. I get Tyler's points. I get all of them. Achane literally could finish RB5, and I would not be surprised at all. He's explosive. He's exciting. He's fast. He's going to have probably 4 70-yard touchdowns this year. That's the kind of player he is, right? I worry about his size and can he carry on the load. I think that really plays into a big reason why they drafted Jalen Wright. I think they know Mostert is not going to be able to carry the workload like he did last year. Probably he's had injury history, like Tyler has mentioned also. So they had to bring in somebody else to kind of help out. So even if Mostert does go down, I think you're going to see a lot of Wright get mixed in as well. It's more of he's going to have these massive games to kind of carry him forward and up the ranks at the end of the year. You're going to look at his final numbers and go, oh, he was awesome. But to Bob Lung's point, he's not going to be consistent. He's going to be the most frustrating RB1 ever. He's going to have 8 awesome weeks and 10 meh weeks. He's the new Amari Cooper of running backs. I dreaded Amari Cooper forever, but now he's fine because he's being drafted as a wide receiver 3. I'll take it. But Achane's not being drafted as a running back 2. But I've got him right at the fringe of it. But I'm ranking for total points, so that's what you've got to do.
All right, Mick, you're the low man on the totem pole for Achane here.
So I completely agree with what Joe said, and I don't disagree with what Tyler said. And actually, to Tyler's point, if they do split him out wide on occasion, I am probably going to be very wrong about this. But just from a running standpoint, he played 11 games last year, which is the first issue you need. Obviously, we talk about the war of attrition, but he played 11 games last year. He only scored double-digit fantasy points in 6 of them. So like Joe said, he's going to be super frustrating for a guy that you're going to start every week because of his upside. Now, he only had 6 games with 10 or more points, but in 5 of those games, he had 20 or more points. So best ball formats, I'll take him every single time. But in redraft, he's going to be super frustrating. Joe mentioned, drafting Wright. I just think that there are too many, cooks in that kitchen between Mostert, Wright. Obviously, they have, Hill and Waddle, who are going to probably catch double-digit touchdowns as well. So I just think it's too much for me at that price. And like I said, in best ball, I'm all about it. But in redraft, I just feel like he's going to be super frustrating to have.
All right. All very good input.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, Mick, you have him
definitely.
ranked probably where I would actually draft him.
Right,
I rank
right.
him higher because
he
I
can
do
blow
think
up,
his total
of course.
points will finish that high because he's going to have
Right.
the 30-point games.
Yeah.
And it's just going to carry him.
All right, so we got a couple more guys we want to talk about here, and I have them broken up in compare contrast again. So the first grouping here is Isiah Pacheco and Rachaad White, and Tyler, Joe, again, you guys are both pretty in line with both of these players, having the same rank for both of them actually, but you have them both ranked lower than Mick does. So, Mick, why do you think these guys are both top 10 options?
Well, White, I will concede is a borderline top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say he's a definitive top 10. I do have him in the top 10, but again, that's kind of based on what we're talking about with total points. I don't know if I would rank him as a top 10 running back every week. Having said that, I was just talking about Achane having double-digit points in just over half of his games in 6 out of 11 games. White did that in 12 out of 17 games last year, and I think he did it in something like 10 of his last 12. So it took him like a month to get going, and then once he, secured the job, he was very consistent. And I think that they're basically going to have the same offense they did last year. He's a great check down option for Baker Mayfield. So I think in half PPR and PPR especially, I like Rachaad White as definitely an RB1, definitely a top 12, potentially a top 10 option. And then as far as Pacheco, after the Chiefs bye week last year, he was 6th in points per game. He got more, kind of like White, he got more involved in the passing game as the season went along. And I saw an interesting stat from my buddy Michael Florio over at NFL Network that Pacheco he averaged 17 points per game, I believe it was, in games in which he had 60% of the snaps, which would have ranked him as like the RB3 last year. And obviously, you want parts of that Chiefs offense. I think they're going to be, another top 5 offense again this year. So I think Pacheco has very little. I'm not too worried about Samaje Perine. He might take a little bit of the receiving work once he gets, acclimated. But I think for the most part, Pacheco is going to be the guy. And yeah, I think he has top 5 upside and should definitely be a top 10 back this season.
All right. Tyler, what do you think about both of these guys? You got Pacheco at 10 and White at 14. So still, fringe RB1 type guys.
I mean, I think Pacheco I have less issue with. I definitely with the offense, and I know people are excited about Samaje Perine being signed there. I can't really get behind that right now. But I do think it's Pacheco's backfield. I don't think I'm ranking him at 6, 7, 10, but I'm not necessarily as serious about contesting the Pacheco rank. I guess for me, Rachaad White, I'll keep it simple, is I just don't think he's a very good running back. I just think he just absolutely lived on volume in a situation last year that kind of made him see volume. Sean Tucker ended up being a dud. I think Chase Edmonds might have been hurt. There was just no one else to compete with Rachaad White, and they just gave him crazy volume. I don't necessarily think it was because he's a talented back. I think I brought it up before, the talent versus situation. I just don't think Rachaad White is that talented of a back, and it was just a really, really nice situation. And, arguably, I think the situation could still be good from a volume standpoint, but, I do think that, with the coach, heading over to the Panthers, I believe, and more so that I do think Bucky Irving's good enough to pull some of that pass work away. That was what really made Rachaad White into what he was last year. I mean, every week I was putting Rachaad White in my top 6, top 8 weekly ranks and being like, what the heck? How did we get here? But it was just everything went to Rachaad White. And I think if everything doesn't go to Rachaad White, he's more of an RB2 and not an RB1. And if, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Bucky Irving is incredible. Frankly, thought he was better on film, liked him more of his prospect, and then the combine, I think, did him a little dirty. But I do think he is a good football player, and I do think he has the ability to take a little bit more away than what we've seen in the following year. So, I mean, I still draft Rachaad White. I still like Rachaad White, but that's why he's just outside of the top 12 for me.
All right. Joe, anything different on either of these guys?
Hey, I'll try to keep this short. Pacheco is a guy that I've actually been moving up my board more and more as the preseason has gone along here. Just really like, everything you're hearing from camp that they're really going to try to like lean on him in this running game, and that he's actually catching more passes. So you got to like that. As far as Rachaad White, a lot to what Tyler said, like not an efficient running back. He was pure volume based last year. And, we did these, 32 team training camp check-in videos. And we talked to JC Allen from one of the Bucs reporters. He was saying that, the offensive line is slightly improved, so maybe the efficiency goes up, just a little bit, but they're not going to give him as many touches as they did last year. They're just not. They're moving Godwin back into the slot, so that's gonna change the offense up a little bit. They did bring in Bucky Irvin, so that's gonna take some workload away. They do trust him enough to be able to spell White a little bit more than what they had last year. So it just makes you want to move him down. Like we talked about Cook earlier, like this is one of the guys that it's like, man, if I'm on the board and I really am looking at running back for some reason at that point, do I want White, a Joe Mixon, a James Cook? AJ, I had this decision in our draft a couple nights ago.
I know.
And I went Mixon overall, both of them. And, it's just kind of like, it was just kind of whatever. Like, it was what I was feeling at the time.
Yeah, I was not happy about that Mixon pick. I was waiting for him to fall 2 more spots to me, but I get it. I agree. I think I agree with the read on White. I had him in a couple of different places last year, and I loved it. Scott Fish was one of them. He helped me into the playoffs and making a deep run into the top 1,000. So that was pretty sweet. But I didn't expect it from him, and I don't know if I am buying into it as much this year. So the last couple running backs we got here, and we'll just hit these guys pretty quick. Kind of the same thing, DeAndre Swift and Devin Singletary. So again, it's more of a mix a little lower on Swift and a little higher on Singletary. So Joe, we'll start with you. Quick point on one or the other of these guys.
Swift is scary where I have him ranked, honestly. Like, I think he's in a bit more of a committee than people really want to believe. It's where, 22 might be a little high, but a lot of the guys behind him are also in committees. So it's like, again, Singletary could be like the steal to where, Mick, you've got him at 19. I don't know if I'd go that high, but like it is, I get it. You're talking a guy who's probably going to have a ton of volume. And like we liked Rachaad White getting a ton of volume last year. Why not Singletary, who did it with the Texans last year? Yes, that offense is going to be – the Texans' offense obviously last year was way better than the Giants are going to be. They're going to be pretty terrible from everything that we've heard and read about that offense.
Suck it, Keith.
But yeah. Where's our sticker, Mike? Singletary, seriously though, like he's just a volume play. It's not gonna be great. But if you're looking for a flex guy who can just put up 10 ugly points every week, that might be Singletary. There you go.
Yeah. All right, Mick. You want to defend your Singletary?
I think Joe. I think I should name my next fantasy team 10 ugly points because that's kind of what I'm looking for, for the most part.
I love it.
Yeah, I kind of like that. So Singletary was actually the RB9 from week 10 on last year, which I did not realize until the other day, to be quite honest. But, we got the conversation earlier about veterans who switch teams. And I think, even though the Giants offense is going to be pretty terrible, like you guys mentioned, Singletary is going to be a volume play. He's going to be a check down receiver when Daniel Jones is running for his life. And he's familiar with Brian Daboll and his offensive scheme. So I think, I'm not too worried about Tyrone Tracy at the moment. I guess we'll see how he comes back from his injury situation. But I think for now, Singletary is going to be a pretty safe flex option. And for me, he's probably going to be a low-end RB2 in 12-team leagues. And I think, he's being super slept on. Again, not a sexy pick, but I just think that he's going to be more or less the guy. Whereas, as Joe mentioned, I do think, if the Bears had cut Khalil Herbert, I think I would move Swift up. But I think between Herbert and Johnson, I do worry that Swift is going to have a little bit of a committee situation for where he's being drafted. It's basically, you basically have 3 viable running backs there, as well as a bunch of solid receivers. So I just worry about Swift's volume at that stage.
Yeah.
Singletary feels like one of those guys where, like, me and Tyler have him ranked like 28 and 29 right now, right? But, like, we're going to go into the week-by-week rankings. Like, the first 3 weeks, we're going to be like, oh, yeah, he's an RB2. Wait, why didn't we have him ranked in RB2 right now? That happens every year. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, hey, what the hell was I doing early on? Who knows?
Yeah. Tyler, any thoughts on either of these guys? Or?
I mean, I appreciate the rank on Singletary, honestly, at 19. I think obviously I think it's bold, but at the same time, I don't think it's ridiculous. Just the way that I've been drafting some of my best ball drafts, I've been grabbing a lot of Singletary too, as like my third running back because he's there, and I think he's going to score points consistently, and particularly when I take some more risky guys. So, I frankly would probably end up moving Singletary up before things lock here next Thursday. But Swift, nothing new to say.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with that as well. I've been getting a lot of shares of Singletary. I don't think I have any of Swift yet, so we'll see if that stays true in my last draft this weekend. But all right, well that ends up our running back discussion here, and we'll go ahead and move it on to the receivers. And all great information, like I said, and we'll keep pounding through here. So back to another rookie to start things off, and that is Mr. Marvin Harrison Jr. We're looking at a 9-16-9 rank here between Joe, Mick, and Tyler. Obviously, Tyler, Joe, we've seen some solid rookie receiver performances in recent years. You guys have him as a top 10 receiver for this year. Mick, I think you've already answered this, but let's hear it one more time. Why you're not buying the hype on the rookie?
Well, here's the thing. I don't want to say I'm not buying the hype on a rookie. Like, if you told me 5 years ago I'd have a rookie receiver as a top 20 receiver, I probably would have thought you were crazy. So I think I'm inching towards the 21st century a little bit, but I just I want to see it. There are so many high-end wide receiver ones for me that I just have him a little bit below that tier. Now that Ayuk is back in San Francisco, I like his spot. Obviously, you got the top 7 or 8 guys who are pretty consensus guys. So I think Harrison's going to be great. Obviously, you're starting him every week. I have him as a top 20 guy. So if you're starting 3 receivers, even starting 2 receivers, you're going to pretty much start him every week. I just kind of want to see it first. I realize that means I'm going to be light on exposure, but it is what it is. I'll take the hit on that.
All right, Tyler, what do you think about him?
I do worry that the fantasy football industry echo chamber has just gotten to me with this 9 rank. Like, it is a bit ridiculous. Like, I think like it's gotten to a point where we have to draft like these rookie wide receivers at their ceiling pretty much. Like, there's no discounts for rookies anymore, and like that's tough. I look at the situation, like I believe in him wholeheartedly as a prospect. Like, the dude's an absolute freaking stud. He's easily slots in as the best wide receiver there. Obviously, we have Trey McBride, but I think they can work completely separately. I don't think they're getting each other's way at all. So for me, it's just more so like the opportunities there. I believe in Kyler. I believe in the offense. I think they have good wide receivers behind him in Wilson, in Dortch, and frankly, I think Zay Jones is pretty solid too. But opportunities there, the talent's there, the scheme, like everything's there. Like, you just check, all the boxes are being checked, and I get why you need to see it. But I also get why people rank him lower, just because there are a lot of guys like you're going to be passing up on probably 150, 160 targets from Devontae Adams, like possible Drake London breakout. I mean, Ayuk, Deebo, like there's some guys that you really got to pass on to click Marvin. I do think it takes a lot of, I don't know if it's courage or being crazy, probably a bit of both to be able to take a rookie that high. So I have him ranked high just because that's how I like operate, how I play. And frankly, I think I'm just in line with industry. And I think the echo chamber of fantasy football can get to me at times. But, I understand the argument for ranking him where Mick has him. And frankly, I respect it. And I have no problem with people passing him for some of those names that I just mentioned.
Yeah. Joe?
Much of the same with Tyler. Like it's opportunity, and we've seen these rookies do it. And I've been hesitant to do it, but this year I'm finally starting to buy into some of these rookies. We've seen it time and time again the last few years that these rookies can come in and perform. And like maybe I'm off by a few spots, but I'd rather take the risk on a guy like Harrison, who I think, if he does hit, is going to vastly outperform like an Olave and a London and an Evans type of guys. And just put him up there. And I mean, come on, we saw Puka Nacua go crazy last year. Nobody even heard of him until the weekend before the season started. It felt like
that's true.
So why not? Let's do it.
And rookies usually perform, better at the second half of the season, and that's usually when it matters. And I think this is probably a little bit biased, but Jamar Chase as a rookie had that 50-point game in week 17, and that kind of sticks out to me where I'm these rookies can really hit late season. I mean, that's a fact. We see the rookies after they hit their stride, and I think that's part of it too. Is if Marv performs well, it's great, but what if he does smash to close the season? Is he kind of hits his full stride as an NFL professional player after playing 10, 12 weeks? I think that's kind of part of it. And a little more narrative driven right there. I don't think there's anything too crazy about it, but for me, it's just if he does smash towards the end of the season, I don't want it. It's same with Achane. If he hits, which I think there's a lot of signs pointing to him hitting, I just don't want to miss. And I think that's what it comes down to.
I'll tell you one thing too, to go back to those training camp videos we did, me and Dylan Clemens, we interviewed the Arizona Cardinals beat writer, and granted, I know it's beat writer talk, and they're gonna pump up their team a little bit, so take it with a grain of salt. But he's just dude, every single day, Marvin Harrison is making plays. He looks like he belongs already. There's no doubt that he is the best player on the field, for this receiving core by far. So that that tells you a lot right there, that these guys, he's just standing out tremendously at camp. So
nice.
You like to hear that.
All right, well, we'll move from one rookie phenom to another, and that's Malik Nabers. Kind of similar trajectory that we got here between you guys. Obviously about 10 spots, to 14 spots lower. So Tyler, you definitely have the higher ranking here at 19. Joe's not too far behind at 21. I mean, what makes you think Nabers is going to be a clear wide receiver 2 this year?
Man, I just think he's a stud. I think it's the situation with Marv he's once in every kind of 8-year prospect. I think there's classes where Malik would have been the number 1 wide receiver prospect. I just believe in his game, believe him as I think he's probably, if you look over the last couple of years, probably a top 5 wide receiver for me in terms of rookies that have come in the league. And just to be clear about that, so if you look at all the wide receiver rookie prospects over the last 3 years, he'd easily be in my top 5. So I'm a huge fan of his. It's just Marv is, I think, really, really good. Nabers is great. Same argument. I think he can come on towards the end of the season. I think he's a stud. I think there's really nothing standing in his way from just absorbing a bunch of targets. I am absolutely scared to have Daniel Jones throwing him the football. And preseason didn't do me any favors either. So, I get it. But, there are some worlds where, for me, it's when I draft him, he can be my wide receiver 3. I've seen him go in the 5th, 6th round of drafts. That's exactly the kind of player I want to be kind of drafting in that range, where it's there is that level of unknown. We know the talent profile's there. We know that there's a world where he can see, a large amount of the targets as well. So, it's same argument. I have him projected right around 138 targets right now, so pretty hefty target share. And I think, he's a maven when he gets the ball in his hands. So it's again, same argument from Marvin in a sense where I don't want to miss if he hits.
Yeah. Joe, anything different? You're right around the same spot.
Yeah, like I've been up and down with him. I've seen my rankings have gone anywhere from this is probably about the highest I've had him. Man, I don't know. There is a lot of hesitation with him. I am definitely afraid of the quarterback situation there. I mean, fact of the matter, Daniel Jones is just, he's not good. Like he's just really not. The Giants beat writer that we had on, or we didn't have a beat writer. We had Rudy Gamble on, but he follows the team really, really closely, and it's just the same thing over and over again with him. It's just he lacks the decision making, he lacks the progressions, and so Nabers is going to be his first read a lot of times, so that's going to help, but I just don't know if there's going to be enough. And right now, I've got him over Devonta Smith and Pittman and Diggs and Rashee Rice and Amari Cooper, even T. Higgins. Some of that is because he will be the number one for his team by far. And, Smith is the number two. Diggs is, we don't totally know. Rashee Rice is, that offense is a lot of mouths to feed, and they like Kelsey a lot. Cooper's the number one, but Watson hasn't clicked there yet. Higgins is the number two, right? So, and with Pittman, it's he's got a good, he's got Anthony Richardson, but we're talking about Jayden Daniels not throwing for a lot of passing yards. I think Richardson's probably in the same ballpark, right? When you really think about it. So that holds him back. So it's kind of in that range where it's Nabers could be a, just the pure volume he's going to get could save him and just slightly boost him above that. Right now, that's where I'm at. Talk to me 3 days from now, and I could be nah, I'm out. Never mind. I'll take all 6 of those guys in front of him just because Nabers. This couldn't have been a worse landing spot for Nabers in year one.
Yeah, Mick, what do you think? You're probably where I'm kind of sitting with him. Honestly, you're sitting at 30.
That's kind of where I'm at. See, to me, this is not a Malik Nabers rank at number 30. This is a Daniel Jones rank. I just think it like you said, it could not have been a worse landing spot. Daniel Jones has been in the league for 5 years. The Giants have not had an 800-yard receiver in the last 5 years. He's just bad. And I acknowledge that Nabers is supremely talented, but talent can only get you so far when you have bad quarterback play, as I, a Jets fan, can attest to. When I watched Garrett Wilson, who I love, I think he finished as the overall 30 or 31 wide receiver last year just because his quarterback play was terrible. And I just think that's what's going to be the issue with Nabers. I think he'll be the number one guy, but it's not going to be enough to make him, a top 20 or possibly even top 25 receiver for me. I think he's more of a wide receiver 3 in 12-team leagues.
Yeah, and I think to some of the names that Joe you had mentioned, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, those guys are more of a 1A in my opinion. I know they're 2 on our fantasy 6-pack depth charts, but they're right there, and if something happens to one of those guys ahead of them, they step up. Or even if something doesn't happen to Chase or AJ Brown, they have their weeks where they outplay them and they're going to beat those guys. I just don't see Nabers really competing in that same level, and it's because of the Daniel Jones factor. So hopefully he still has a decent season. I don't have any shares of him myself. I was kind of hoping to maybe get 1 or 2, but I feel like maybe he's going to end up being more of a best ball kind of play for anything this year. So next guy we got here is Old Faithful, and that's Mike Evans. This is the guy I kind of picked for, our disparity guy, and it's the biggest difference in the overall ranks. So just real quick, let's let the listeners know your stance on Evans and why you're kind of higher or lower on him this season, if it's anything different than what we've already talked about. Joe, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, look, it really comes down to the chemistry that him and Baker had last year was pretty incredible. I don't know if we're going to get quite that again. But, when the rankings first came out for me, I think he was hovering around that like 15, 16 range. And I was like, but why? Like, it was like that meme, I was like, but why? It didn't make any sense. Like, he's a stud, man. Like, every year I feel like we undervalue him, and all he does is go out and 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. It's like, okay. So I moved him up. Pretty simple.
Makes sense. All right, Mick, you've got him the highest at 10 here, so you kind of agree?
I totally agree. I think he's a stud. I think he finished as wide receiver 5 last year, and I don't know if I believe in 100% the production, from a touchdown standpoint that he had last year, but he's always going to be the red zone threat. And, like Joe said, he and Baker have a great chemistry. So I think the floor is just super high where, that's kind of what I'm looking for in that range. If you get, obviously, if you draft a top 5 receiver, you're looking for like the blow up games. I'm not sure how many blow up games Mike Evans is going to have, but he's going to have a ton of, 12, 15, 18 point games. And I think by the end of the season, he is a compiler too. He's very consistent. I think he's only missed like 5 games in his career. So he's a little bit of a compiler, but I do think that, there's no reason to think he's going to suddenly fall off a cliff. So I like where he's at.
All right, Tyler, you got the lowest rank on him, so.
It's tough to make the argument. I think it just comes like, I like him. I'm going to draft him. I have him on a lot of my teams. I just would rather take my shots on Ayuk, Deebo, and Waddle. That's really all comes down to it. It has nothing to do with Mike Evans himself. So you could shift up a couple spots. Like, I can see it happening now that we got the Ayuk news. I kind of can settle in a little bit here, but not much to add. I love Mike Evans. Always have.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great point. Because I was going to say that too. That he's like a steady wide receiver 2 most weeks, but that's going to make him a wide receiver 1 at the end because he's always there, right? Kind of like the Kirk Cousins of like for receivers. Like, he finishes the QB 12, and you're like, how the hell did he do that? Oh, because he was plus the QB 15 ever.
Yeah.
That was it.
All right, cool. So the next guy we got here, we did mention this name earlier, and that's Michael Pittman. Mick, you've got the highest rank on him here. You're looking at 17 for him. But you did have Richardson as the lower rank of the group. Again, still top 12, small disparity there. But what do you like about Pittman as your clear wide receiver 2 here?
I think it's sort of like, it seems like a contradictory thing, but I think it's kind of related in the sense that if I think that Richardson's rushing takes a step back, if they decide to kind of ease the reins on him running as much, then I think, by contrast, they'll have him throw more. And I just think that Pittman is a stud, especially in PPR leagues. He had a really high target share last year. That's hard to equate that with, Minshew being in the fold. But I think, we talked about quarterbacks and their progressions. Like, I'm not sure if Richardson is going to be great from a progression standpoint, but that means Pittman is going to be his first read more often than not. And, he did finish as a, wide receiver 2 last year. I think he finished 15th in half PPR, maybe a little bit lower in points per game, but I think he's going to be in that range of like, top 15, top 20 this season.
All right. Tyler, anything different on Pittman? You got him as the lowest one here at 26.
Yeah. I think it comes down to like, okay, so there's a lot to unpack here with the Pittman ranking. One, I think Minshew is better for him than A-Rich. I think A-Rich is a pretty bad passer, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think it's not necessarily going to help. I like, Mick, when you mentioned like the progression, like you're just going to throw to Pittman. Like I hear that argument. I think I famously have been kind of talking about like before Downs went down, no pun intended, like they were pretty equal in terms of their production, but now Downs is down again. So it's like, kind of throw that argument out. I do like Mitchell. Think he's a pretty solid prospect. I think what it comes down to is I have the pass attempts for the Colts is I think either the lowest or probably second or third lowest in the NFL. I think they're going to be rushing between having Jonathan Taylor and having A-Rich. I think they're going to try to be a run-first team. I do think they're going to be a fast team. That's typically how things run over there in terms of their pace of play, how many plays they get. But I do think it's going to be a run-focused team. And I do have issues with, Downs might be playing. I think he can come back. With Mitchell, there's a little bit, there's more options in the pass game, and I don't think the pass game is going to be that great. I just think when I kind of line all of that stuff up between like A-Rich being a poor passer, them running the ball all the time, Downs being back, them drafting Mitchell, they're not just having like Al Pierce running wind sprints down the sideline the whole time anymore. It's just really tough for me to like build a upside case for Pittman. I think that's really what it comes down to. I do think he's going to be in a world where it's like, again, if you need like 10 or 12 like half PPR points, he could be that guy for you. It's just really hard for me to build a case where Pittman is necessarily like winning me weeks. And I kind of look at where, other wide receivers in that range or other players in that range, I think they just have a little bit more upside. I think Pittman is safe and steady, but at the same time, I just don't see enough there. The boxes are not checked for me to get excited about drafting Pittman. And for those reasons, I have very few shares of Pittman.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, much of the same. And I mean, if you just look at the box scores from last year when Anthony Richardson was in the game, the first week was awesome because he scored a touchdown. A lot of the volume was there, and that's fine, but like it didn't really amount to a whole lot. So he's going to be a volume-based receiver because he's kind of like the man over there for the most part. But I mean, Downs will get his. But I mean, yeah, this is going to be a running team. Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson. When they get near the goal line, that's what's going to happen. And so Pittman's touchdowns will suffer. And so that's why he's lower for me.
Yeah. All right. So the last set of receivers here we're going to highlight is our kind of, I call it the vice versa grouping. And that's our NFC West rivalries, Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf. So we basically have polar opposites with the rankings. Mick, you're on the island again with the lower ranking on Deebo at 19 compared to 14 for Joe and Tyler, and flip that around for Metcalf. You got him at 14, and the other guys have him at 19 and 18. So I guess basically, Tyler, we'll start with you. What do you like about these guys, and what was kind of your tie break between these two?
Sorry, I had the baby crying in the background. We said Metcalf, right?
Yeah, Metcalf and Deebo.
Yeah, I mean, Deebo, it's the rushing that's so tantalizing for me. Like when I put that rushing in, like it's when I look at like Deebo's projections, like I don't think I have him for 1,000 yards, and for him to have that high and not be 1,000-yard receiver is crazy. But I do have just like so much rushing for him where it like kind of makes sense. And I just love Deebo, and I just love that offense. And he's a player that I want to be ahead of market on, that I can get him into my lineups. Like I'm a big fan of getting him there. DK, he's a little bit more difficult for me. Like the thing is, I look at where you guys have him in like the 14. Like it makes sense. Like I don't necessarily, let's say like 14's too high. There's just this like range of wide receivers for me where it's, again, like not to cop out, but it's just like there's this range where I'm okay with like whatever falls I'm gonna take. I'm a fan of what the Seahawks are going to be putting down this year. I think DK is still the clear wide receiver one there. So really just down to like I think I have a pretty hefty chunk of rushing for Deebo that kind of bumps him up. He's hurt all the time. I think but like if he's healthy, like I think being a wide receiver one is absolutely in there, which is kind of like a running back two in there. But DK, gosh, man, like I see him at 14 and I have no problem with that. Like it's funny to say that, but like I don't have a problem with DK at 14. I think he is that good. Sure, he's gonna have some up and down games because there's a lot of long ball going on there. But when I see your 14 rank and I see my 18 rank, like I don't really have anything to say in terms of like, he shouldn't be that high, because I think things are good there.
Yeah. All right, Joe, agree with that or?
Yeah, I mean, DK sort of loses a little bit because of Geno Smith is really kind of what holds it back. And then, if we're all expecting JSN to kind of take a little step forward, it's going to hurt Lockett, sure, but Lockett's still going to be involved. So now you're talking about 3 receivers that are going to get, in the mix a little bit more. Metcalf's got to take a little bit of a hit. this was one of the slowest paced teams last year. We're hearing a lot of good things that they're going to pick up the pace this year, but that all factors in, right? And with Deebo, I have bumped him up slightly with Ayuk not signing, but since just before this show, Ayuk signed, I'm going to have to reevaluate that one slightly. Maybe he gets a couple of ticks down, but it won't be much. I mean, he's still a stud. The one thing you have to worry about with Deebo is he plays through injuries a lot, but you can tell he's not 100%, but then there are games he will miss. It's like it's almost inevitable. He's going to miss a game or two.
Yeah. Nick, you got the floor. Any thoughts between these two? Why you like DK
I
above?
think it's interesting. Like Tyler said, like he's not really balking at my rankings. I'm not really balking at your guys either. You can certainly make the argument for Deebo. I think the rushing aspect is interesting now that Elijah Mitchell is out. So I think, I have Deebo at 19, but now I'm going to reevaluate bumping him up a little bit because of the potential rushing there. So I think that's interesting. And as far as DK, I do think this is going to be a little bit of a faster paced offense. And, I agree with what Joe said about JSN, but also, I think Lockett's going to kind of fade out a little bit. So I just think DK and Geno have enough of a chemistry and a history that I think, he's going to be the main target. And I do think this is going to be a little bit, more efficient offense than last year. So yeah, I think DK is going to be fine.
Hopefully they run more than go routes with DK this year. I felt like that's all they did. It was like, what is going on? This guy's better than that. Just give him the ball and let him knock over people.
Right.
Yeah, seriously. All right. So that's all we got for receiver. We're going to cut the last couple guys out here, move it along and go with the tight end rankings here. So we got 3 names we want to highlight. The first one we'll leave by himself, and that's Mr. Taysom Hill. Joe, we're going to start with you on this one. You're one spot lower than Tyler has him at 15 compared to 14. So Taysom, as I'm deeming him here, Inspector Gadget. He's basically going to be a potential backup for your tight end. What do you like about Taysom? Why do you have him this high? Is it the music? Is it the song from Inspector Gadget? Is that it?
I don't like Taysom Hill from a fantasy standpoint. He's the most frustrating player that. He's one of the most frustrating players. It's like when trying to think of a fullback who used to snake all the touchdowns from the running back. I'm blanking on a name right now, but
Tolbert used to do that shit all the time.
Yeah.
Dude.
Oh God, yes, Tolbert. Thank you.
Yeah.
It just is so frustrating because, dude, you're looking at I'm looking at the points from last year, man. The first 5 weeks, 0.4, 8.2, 2.6, 2.7, 2.5. You can't use that. Then boom, 14.8, 22, 18. You're like, oh, all right, now we in season. 3.3. But because tight end is so volatile, at that point, he's going to have these monster weeks. He's going to score, near double-digit total touchdowns because he just gets used in the red zone. They're going to use him all over the place. They've already talked about it. They're going to use him at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end. They're going to line him up at fullback. And, they're just doing everything with him. And it's just go away. give it all to Kamara and Olave, please. But no, it's really just going to carry him up into, I actually wouldn't even be surprised if he finishes tight end 10. Because he's going to have so many of these good weeks. But good luck trying to figure out when those are.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with him.
Mick, you've got the logical read on it here. 23.
Yeah, I don't know if it's logical. I'm just a born hater, I guess. But so like Joe was saying, he's a jack of all trades, master of none, really. But he mentioned the kind of spike weeks that he had towards the middle of the season. Most of those were in games that Juwan Johnson didn't play. I think in 3 of the 4 weeks he didn't play, those were 3 of Hill's biggest weeks points-wise. If you take into account the games where Johnson played, I think we'd have Hill a little bit viewed a little bit lower. And also, I just wonder like when this is going to end. So like my wife, who has not watched football at all until we met, like we'll be watching a Saints game, and even she will be like, "Oh my God, why is that guy playing again?" Like it's just I don't understand like why this is still a thing. 34 years old. Like I know he got like a late start in his career and all that, but this is not a guy who should be getting all this volume. I just don't get it. And so I don't even know why he's listed as a tight end. Like over the last 4 years, he has 54 receptions and like 300 carries. So I don't know why he's even still listed as a tight end. He should be listed as a running back, but that's another rant for another time. Yeah. But I just think if Juwan Johnson's on the field, I think Hill's ceiling is super low. So yeah, I'm not into it.
Yeah. Tyler, anything to
I mean, he's been a top 13 tight end the last 4 years, not because he's playing tight end, just because he scores fantasy points. So like And also I think like a more bad color to it, it's like Dennis Allen hates everybody, but he doesn't hate Hill. And I just think
go right on cue, Scampers.
He hates everybody, but doesn't hate Taysom Hill. And I think it's just one of those things. Like if they decide to use Taysom Hill differently and give him more snaps and more usage, like he breaks the tight end position. Like if all of a sudden he becomes like a full-time quarterback for some reason, or they're like, oh, it's like all of a sudden he's getting 6 to 8, rushes a game. Or they have a legitimate, all the jokes about Taysom Hill packages in the end zone. Like if for some reason they like up Taysom Hill in terms of his snaps or usage, like he's going to break the tight end position almost entirely. And I don't say that lightly. So am I drafting him? No. Am I starting him? No. Yeah. But it's just like, it's more of like, I rank him there because he's going to finish there. I don't rank him there because I want to draft him.
But yeah, I think to that point, I think he either finishes as a top 12 tight end or he finishes outside the top 25. Like, I don't think there's like a middle ground for him.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing here is the only time I'm going to target him is if I somehow screw up and draft 2 quarterbacks with the same bye week and then like need a fill in and he's got the QB eligibility. I hope like hell that's one of the weeks that he hits and he can play in that spot.
That's true.
I mean, that would be like the ultimate, everybody thinks you're an idiot because you took 2 core quarterbacks on the same bye week. Well, no, this was my plan all along. And it just happened to work. But I'm with you guys. I think just the idea of him is frustrating and astounding all at the same time. And, I don't think that I'm going to actually end up getting him in my last draft. And I'm probably okay with that. So
yes.
Last two names we got here. One we mentioned earlier, and that's Dalton Kincaid. And then the other guy is Deebo's, partner in crime here. And that's Mr. George Kittle. Both of these guys are being drafted as upper echelon, upper tier guys for tight end, and rightfully so. You guys are all pretty close on these two. Again, you're looking at Kincaid, Joe, and Tyler. You're at 5. Mick, you got him at 8, and then kind of the reversal on Kittle. Mick, you're at 4, and then 7s for the other two. So. Again, what's your tiebreaker situation for these guys? They're both pretty good offenses, so and decent quarterbacks. Mick, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'm gonna land with Kittle on 4 by next week because Ayuk is back in the fold. So I was kind of thinking that maybe he'd get a little more volume. So he might be closer to 5 or 6 by the time things lock next week. But I still love him. He's 15 points last year. Obviously, I'm high on Purdy, so passing game volume's not going to be there. The efficiency is going to be there. I just think the fantasy points are going to be there at the end of the day. So, I don't dislike Kincaid. Obviously, I have him as a top 8 guy, and I think he'll probably be the most targeted player in that offense. But I just think from a efficiency standpoint and a scoring standpoint, I think I'm going to lean towards Kittle there.
All right, Tyler?
I mean, I think it really comes down to just like I got more volume coming Dalton Kincaid's way. That is the one piece of this. Like I do like Kittle. I'll probably be drafting Kittle. He's like, to me, I always talk about Kittle being like he is, his floor is usually like what you get from a streamer, but his ceiling is like week winning. That's how I usually talk about Kittle. But like I think there's just it was almost mentioned before, but it's just like I just don't have any faith in any other real pass catchers on this Buffalo Bills team, and I don't see them being bad. Like I think Josh Allen and the coaching staff, like I still think they're going to be a good team, and I see a lot of it's going to have to go Kincaid's way. So I think it's a lot more like volume based here. If you're playing in like godforsaken like standard leagues, like I'd probably take Kittle over Kincaid, but I at the same time, I view them very much as kind of being in the same tier of a tight end where it's like. I don't have them. I have a top 3 tier. They're in the second tier together. I usually try to leave with like somebody in one of those 2 tiers, as I don't like to be streaming the tight end position if I don't have to. So yeah, don't have any issue necessarily with ranking either way, but that's the reason why I have them the way I have them ranked.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, volume for Kincaid gets him up there. It really does. There was a little scare earlier on in the preseason that Dawson Knox was still going to be like heavily involved. Yeah, I don't believe you. Basically, nah. I think we're out on that one. So, because you saw this, you could just go back and look at the splits when Knox was healthy last year. Kincaid took a massive hit, and he was really good without him. So, that was with Diggs and Gabe Davis and, or at least every other game, Gabe Davis. So you get rid of those guys, you add Kincaid, Knox is going to get a little, shifted out of the offense. Kincaid to the moon, right? It's potential. Kittle is just, come on. He had his first 1,000-yard season last year since 2019. I know it was the first full season with Purdy, so that makes a huge difference. But there are still just too many games where they just ask him to block. And now that Ayuk is back, and I guess I hadn't really shifted this one up with the Ayuk news like I did the receivers where I flip-flopped them. But with Ayuk back for sure, like 7-8 range for Kittle is where I'm happy with him, because I don't know if the volume for him is going to be there, and he really relies on like a lot of yards after the catch, and it's hard to keep repeating for a 30-year-old tight end who battles injuries himself sometimes. So
I can't really argue with either of these 2 guys. I like both of them this year. Kincaid with the volume, like you guys said, it's going to be there. There's not really another really trusted option in the receiving game. So I think he's just going to eat this year. And Kittle, I think he'll do the same, but with the Ayuk news, it does knock him down a peg for me as well. So, and again, I'm not a official ranker. I'm a just personal opinion type ranker. So leave it to the experts here. Yes, exactly. It's all in the gut. But awesome. Well, that wraps it up, guys. I want to thank you both, Mick and Tyler, for coming on tonight. Longer show, but this one always is. It's just an awesome, overall conversation, and we get to pick the brains of the experts here, and we really appreciate you guys both coming on. So before we close out, though, we'll let you guys put out your info and let us know where everybody can find you. And Mick, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on, and even just this process, because I know this was a pick on Mick show, but I looked at some of your guys' rankings, and I was like, okay, let me see, maybe I'm missing a couple things. I ended up making a couple of tweaks, and I'm sure I'll make some more tweaks as the week goes along. So I really appreciate this conversation, first and foremost. You can follow me on Twitter at themick23. My rankings every week will be on #football.com. They will also my flex rankings on Fantrax. I might be doing some stuff for Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros as well. But as far as my weekly rankings, you can find those on #football.com every week.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great conversation, and I hope I didn't pick on you too much. It was
not at all. It's all good.
We're here, these guys.
All good fun.
All right, Tyler. What about you? Where can everybody find your work at?
You can find my Twitter at FFTylerO. Mainly just pushing through JWB Fantasy Football. Got a YouTube channel, JWB Fantasy Football. Also got a new JWB clips. If you kind of a short video content's more so your thing, go there, subscribe to both. Everything's gonna be flowing through there. You can also kind of listen to those YouTube shows on Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. So Twitter usually there. Don't tweet as much these days, but if you're looking to chat, always there. And then all content will be flowing through JWB this season.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again for both of you guys for coming on. Good luck with any remaining drafts you have, and good luck in your seasons this year and your rankings.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Thanks. All right, Joseph.
All right, man.
I think I'm done.
Am I leading it out?
I think you can lead it out. I'm done talking.
All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in. I have fun with the show, like AJ said, every single year. I look forward to sitting here and talking rankings with two of the best. I mix it up every single year who comes on. So just love getting to meet some of the other guys that I compete against in the Fantasy Pros Accuracy Challenge. So, but while you're still here, if you are still here, I know it's a long show, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We appreciate it. And tune in next week when it is week 1 officially of the NFL season. Good night and see y'all next time.